Well, hello everybody, Matt over at SFREP. Thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it. I know it's, a random Wednesday afternoon, but I'm glad that you took a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to join us here. Today, we are going to be taking a look at Appraise-It Pro. And this is the first in a two-part webinar series that we do. The second part of this is entitled Appraise-It Pro Tips and Tricks. And we have one of those coming up, and we'll go over the webinar schedule later on. But just letting you know, this is the introduction, and then we will be doing a part two, which is Appraise-It Pro Tips and Tricks. We actually have both of these webinars on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/SFREP, so that you can take a look at them after hours, or you can review this. And of course, this webinar will automatically be available in a watch later format on our YouTube channel as well. So once again, that's youtube.com/SFREP. So a couple of things that we want you to know about Appraise-It Pro. First of all, it can coexist on your system along with Appraise-It Classic. So you can actually install it. Now, if you look at my system here, I have both of these installed at the same time. And when you install Appraise-It Pro, it will convert all of your databases and files and everything over, but you will still be able to use Appraise-It Classic. And just to make you feel a little bit better, if you need to, you can always return to Appraise-It Classic. Even if you started an appraisal in Appraise-It Pro, you can then move it back over to Appraise-It Classic, kind of as a fail-safe. Okay? The other thing we want you to know is that Appraise-It Pro is available at no additional cost to you. So as long as you're on the Appraise-It subscription plan, you have access to Appraise-It Pro, and all you have to do is contact our sales office, and you can do that by contacting them at 800-644-4051, or you can just email them at sales@sfrep.com, but just contact them at that number. What they'll do is they will place Appraise-It Pro onto your account at no additional charge, and then they can either send you an email that will give you detailed instructions on how to download and install it, or they can schedule a time for one of our technicians to contact you, log into your computer, and then they can take that over and set that up for you. Okay? Also, Appraise-It Pro, just in case you didn't know, it's a 64-bit program, and to my knowledge, it's the only 64-bit appraisal software on the market right now. So what that means is that if you are on a computer that has more than 4 gigabytes of RAM, for instance, this computer I'm on right now has 16 gigabytes of RAM, Appraise-It Pro is able to leverage the extra RAM that you have on your computer system and not have to swap things out to the hard drive, which would definitely slow things down. So you can throw very large images at it. You can throw 100-page PDFs at it. Appraise-It Pro is not going to blink when you do things like that. It's rock solid stable. It's been out for about, it's got to be in its third year now. It's rock solid stable. I think you'll be very happy with its speed, its reliability. It's just overall a better experience. So we're going to go over that experience today. So let's go ahead and launch Appraise-It Pro. Now you don't see the splash screen that actually happens on my other monitor, but there we go. There's Appraise-It Pro, and no, I don't want to do that. So when you first start Appraise-It Pro, you're going to be in this area that is called the Backstage. Now, that's what Microsoft calls it, and that's what our development team calls it. I kind of like to call it a super file menu. And the reason is, if I click on this little arrow up here at the top to jump back over here to the editing window, and of course I don't have a report open currently, but if I jump back to the editing area here, you'll see that as I move around in these menus over here, sitting there for me with a little black background to set it apart is the file menu. And if I click on that, I go back to this area, and everything that's in here corresponds with what's in the file menu in a regular program, including Appraise-It Classic. So kind of like to call it the super file menu, but just so you know, the name of this area is called the Backstage. Now, the first thing that is shown to you when you go into Appraise-It Pro, you're going to be at this welcome screen. And this is basically a web page that we can update. Now, we don't put images or GIFs or anything flashy, videos or anything like that in here. This is mainly made so that we can communicate with you and give you important information. Sometimes it's sales related. We'll let you know if there's like a flood map sale or something like that. But it's just a way that we can communicate with you without being too intrusive. We're not going to, without sending you an email, without calling you, things like that. Just a way to kind of keep you up to date. So just kind of think of it as a news feed. Below that, we have new. New is basically the file new menu or the file index or the forms list that was in Appraise-It Classic. So all of the different forms that are available to you are here just like they were in Appraise-It Classic. And that includes having a frequently used section, which is my favorite. And if I select something from this list, I'm going to click on the 1004. You'll see that I have a bunch of templates here. Now, we'll go over templates a little bit more in depth in a little while, but for now, just know that a template is essentially filling that same niche as custom skeletons were in Appraise-It Classic. Okay, so basically templates are analogous to custom skeletons. However, under the hood and in practice, they're quite a bit different. They're much easier to deal with, much easier to create, much easier to edit, and we'll go over all that here in a little while. By the way, if you have any questions while we're going along, feel free to use the live chat that's over to the right side of the window here in YouTube. Also, there will be a little looks like little brackets in the lower right hand corner. If you click on that, that'll send everything to full screen. You might be able to see things a little bit better, or you can use the box that'll be over there to go into the cinematic mode, which will also give you a larger screen or a larger view of this, but it will maintain your ability to use the chat. Okay, so if you have any questions, use the chat. If you are not signed in to YouTube and you don't see the chat or you can't use the chat, you can also send me an email. Just simply send an email to training@sfrep.com. You can also use that if you are watching this video after the fact, if you're not watching live. Training@sfrep.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. So in order to open up a new appraisal, what I would do, and I'm not going to do that yet because we've got a couple more things to go over here, but if I were to want to open up a 1004, if I double click here, it's going to open up a blank default template that kind of has some things added to it already. Things like mapping, some image pages, things like that, some extra comp pages. And that is because I have this little checkbox down here, include suggested forms in the default template. Now, if I uncheck that, it's just going to open up a bare bones appraisal report. Now, you may be a little bit confused at this point because you're like, well, wait a minute, I thought I just go to contents and then fill out whatever I need to. The way that you build a report in Appraise-It Pro is fundamentally different from the way that you did it in Appraise-It Classic. And in a few minutes, I'm going to hit a point where I'm going to stop down and tell you this is where you really need to pay attention, because once you understand how and when you build a report in Appraise-It Pro, everything else will click into place. So if you get anything from this webinar, that's going to be it, and I'll let you know when we get there. But basically, what you need to know at this point is that you're going to build your report instead of building it at the end when you're ready to print it, quote unquote. You're going to build your report at the beginning and as you go along. And I'll explain what that means here in a little while, but just be on the lookout for that, and I'll let you know when we get to that point, okay? So over here under templates, if I wanted to open up a template / custom skeleton, think of it that way, what I could do is just double click here, and then that will open up that custom skeleton. You could also just single click and then click create report, but the create report button's a little bit redundant. You can just double click on any of these. Now, you'll notice that what I've done is I've created some custom skeletons based on cities and neighborhoods. If you're welcome to do that. You can also do it for individual lenders, just like you did with custom skeletons. You can create templates for a variety of different reasons. And just like in a custom template, you can fill out a template, or excuse me, just like in a custom skeleton, you can fill out a template with data that you want to put in there. You can also place images in there. You can place PDFs, whatever you want to do to make it yours. You can do that to create a template. And essentially what a template is in Appraise-It Pro is it's just a report file that's been promoted to template status. So if in Appraise-It Classic you were opening up old reports and then editing them for the purposes of creating a new report, we call that cloning. That's essentially what a template is. Let's move on down to Open. Now, you probably won't go into Open too often. You usually will use Search, which we'll go over next, but there are some helpful things in here. First of all, on the left-hand side, under Report, we have Open Report, Open Classic Report, and Open Mismo Document. Open Report, yeah, you're probably going to use Search to find something, but if you want to, you can click on Open Report, and then you can browse to a specific report manually, essentially. Open Classic Report does the same thing, but it does it with a classic report. Now, the cool thing is that when you install Appraise-It Pro, it's going to re-index all of your report files, including your Appraise-It Classic files, and it's going to treat them the same. So you could open up a classic file and not even know it really was a classic file because it'll just work. It'll just open up in Appraise-It Pro as if it were a native Appraise-It Pro report file. Same thing goes for Mismo documents. You probably won't use this very often unless you are moving over from another software provider like Alamode or ACI or Bradford. If you've been archiving all of your Mismo XML documents, then what we can do is we can copy those into a folder in Appraise-It Pro, and they'll get indexed and treated as if they were native Appraise-It Pro report files. And that'll allow you to bring over a lot of your data from your old software provider. The other way that if you've been an SFREP customer for a while, where you may want to use this right here, is if you have a colleague who is using another software package. So if you got a colleague who's using Alamode or a friend who's using Alamode and they want to share a report with you, they can just send you the Mismo XML document, which is a universal format, and then you'll be able to open up that Mismo document and see the PDF that's embedded in it of the whole report just by opening up Mismo document there. We also have Open Template and Open Classic Skeleton. Open Template you're probably not going to use very often because more than likely you're going to get to a template by going into New. But Open Classic Skeleton, that you may use quite a bit, especially at the very beginning of your use of Appraise-It Pro. In early test versions of Appraise-It Pro, we were converting all custom skeletons automatically over to Appraise-It Pro templates. But what we found was that that's not really what everybody wanted, and that didn't work very well. And it didn't work very well in the fact that it was bringing over a lot of old, quote-unquote, dirty skeletons. This sounds weird, like dirty skeletons in your closet, but it was bringing over a lot of old, dirty skeletons that a user may not, they could have been like 10 years old and you just never used them anymore. So we didn't want to bring over all that stuff. What we recommend you do is create new templates in Appraise-It Pro from scratch. That's going to do two things for you. One, you're going to have nice, clean, up-to-date skeletons. And two, by doing that, you are going to very quickly learn how Appraise-It Pro works, and you're going to be an expert in it by the time you've made like 3 or 4 skeleton or templates. Sometimes I'm going to conflate skeletons and templates. It is what it is, so bear with me. I'll generally catch myself. But we do understand that you are going to have some very complicated, verbose skeletons in Appraise-It Classic that you're going to want to convert over. So we do give you Open Classic Skeleton as a selection here. And what you can do is click on this, and then you will be able to browse in skeletons from Appraise-It Classic, and then edit them, clean them up, and then save them as new templates. So we do give you that option. And then finally over here is recent reports. This is like the most recent, maybe 20 reports that you've been working on. So if you've worked on something in the last, the last week or so, maybe you worked on something on Monday and it's now Wednesday and you want to go back to it, you can just come here to recent reports and just go ahead, find it, and then open it up and save yourself the trouble of having to go into search for it. Speaking of search, we'll move on to that over here on the left-hand side. Search is very similar to the way it worked in Classic. This is very similar to the file index. This is automatically maintained whenever you save a report. The database that this uses is updated. And it's going to catalog all of the addresses that were in the database. It's going to catalog all the information about those particular addresses and allow you to search for it. And just like in the search in Appraise-It Classic, in the file index in Appraise-It Classic, the more information that you fill out here, the more targeted and narrow your search results are going to be. You can also fully customize this, but that's something we go over in our part 2, which is the Appraise-It Pro tips and tricks. So make sure that you join us for that webinar. But really, all you need to know for right now is in this default setup, the more information you put in here, the more narrow, the fewer results you're going to get. So in your computer, if I were to just hit search here, I would just come up with thousands of records. In my computer, however, because I don't do appraisals on this computer, I'm only going to come up with maybe 4 or 5 results. So instead of doing an actual search here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a blank search, which is going to show everything that's in my database, just so you can see what search results look like. So there we go. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got 5. Now, if I select a particular address here, and I think I've been monkeying around with this because I was testing some stuff for one of our developers. So right now it doesn't have a front view that I can show you. But if a particular address has a front view available to it, that will be shown here along with some key information about that particular address. But unfortunately, because I've been monkeying around with things, it's not showing the front view right now. You may also notice that the report files over here for Appraise-It Pro are RPTX. And in Appraise-It Classic, they're RPT. The X means that we use an XML format for our appraisal reports. So just keep that in mind. RPTX, all that means is that it's just to differentiate Appraise-It Pro from Appraise-It Classic. It's the very same thing that they did in Office when they moved to an XML-based format. They changed from DOC to DOCX, from DocX, or Doc to DocX. Same thing, same type of idea there. Finally, we have settings. You can come in here and customize Appraise-It Pro to your heart's content. However, if you are somebody who is a little bit shy about going in and changing settings and you're a little bit trepidatious, you may want to only come in here with one of our tech support people on the line with you. But if you are somewhat of interest, or if you like to customize things to your heart's content, you may want to jot down whatever you change in here just in case it causes some type of behavior that you don't necessarily love. Okay? Also down here, you see some grayed out options. The reason these are grayed out is because I don't currently have a report open, and you're probably not going to use these very often because they are duplicated under the home menu, so most people don't use them, so I'm just going to skip over them. They're pretty self-explanatory, as are these last 2 selections, new window and exit. Now, new window is kind of cool because Appraise-It Pro, unlike Classic, you can open up as many instances of Appraise-It Pro as you wish. So you could open up Appraise-It Pro with one report file, open up Appraise-It Pro with another report file, copy and paste between them, reference each other. You can have 5 open if you want at one time. You can put each of them on a different monitor if you have multiple screens like I do on my computer here. You're currently viewing my left screen. I also have a right screen that you can't see. And you can, move things around and reference and copy and paste. So it's very helpful. And then, of course, exit's very self-explanatory. It just means that it's going to exit the program. It does the same thing as the red X in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, so that's kind of the tour of the Backstage or the Superfile menu. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to open up a blank default template 1004 by double-clicking here. Actually, that's actually going to open up the Clyde. So let me change this. Close, yes. No, I don't want to save. We'll come back over here. Default template, double click. Okay. So here is Appraise-It Pro in all of its glory as far as how you are going to see it 99% of the time and how you are going to edit reports. This is a blank report, a default skeleton, so now you can see kind of what is included when you open up a default skeleton. Now remember, I had that checkbox checked, so it's going to include some needed forms in here, including some comp forms here. It's also going to have some general photos. It's going to have location and flood map, all of this stuff that I can use as a starting point. Now, what you might want to do at this point is to build a beginning part of your report. Now, this is assuming that you're not opening up a skeleton, or excuse me, a template. If you're opening up a template, you would have already done this, and it's going to give you a good starting point. But in this particular report, I know I'm not going to need a flood map. We'll just say it's on the side of a mountain, or it's going to be on a hill, or someplace where flooding just isn't a concern. So I want to get rid of the flood map. And that's very important here. Remember, I told you that we were going to get to a point where you really need to pay attention, because this is what you're going to need to know when moving over from Classic to Pro. And we've reached that point, and that has to do with this report panel. Now, this is a panel right here. You'll notice we have 4 panels here: report, validator, responses, and format. There's actually a third or a 5th one there that's hidden. It's labeled as help, but we'll go over that here in a little while. But in the report panel, this is where we really need to concentrate and pay attention, because this is the biggest difference between Classic and Pro. And so what I want to do here is I want to start building my report now, and I'll also build it as I go along, but we're not going to build it at the end by using a print scheme or something like that. We're going to build how our report is going to be delivered right now. So I know in this report I'm not going to need a flood map, so I'm just going to highlight it by clicking on it, and then I'm going to click on remove, and then I'm going to say yes, and now it's out of there. It's very important that you keep the report panel tidy. And what I mean by that is, if there is going to be an addendum or a form that you're not going to be using in there, you need to get rid of it, because you only want forms and addenda in here that you are going to have filled out. And the reason for that is that if you come back into this report a week or 2 or 3 from now, because you've got a request for an edit, or they have a question about it, or for whatever reason, you want to be able to look at this report panel here and see exactly what you sent to them, what was in the report, and in what order. So not only are you going to set what is contained in the report panel, you're also going to set its order as well. And the way you do that, let's say you want to put the location map at the very beginning. Maybe you like doing that. So if I click on location map and hold, so click and hold, and I'm going to drag it up here to the top, I can move things around in this report panel. So let's say I wanted the report profile up at the beginning as well. Maybe I like to print that for some reason. So what I can do, click and drag it up there and put it where I want it. Now let's also say I'm going to need some other forms that aren't included in here. Maybe I am going to need a COVID addendum. I don't think anybody's using the COVID addendum anymore, but it's still in there, and I like to use it because it's easy to search for it. So I'm going to click on add. I'm going to come over here, type in COVID, and this will show you all of the different forms that have COVID in their name. And you'll see that these are all actually just repeating in here. And that's because, forms and addenda can show up in a number of different categories. So this one right here is showing up under frequently used, and it's also showing up under Fannie Mae. So I'm just going to grab the one from Fannie Mae. If I double click it, it will be added down at the bottom of the list. And by the way, this right here is just a replication of this report panel over here. So they're identical. So if I double click it, it gets added in at the end. Now it hasn't been added over here yet because I have to click on save and close. But let's say I don't actually want it at the end. So I'm going to get rid of it by using this little arrow here. And what I can do is if I want to put the COVID addendum in at the beginning, I can simply click and drag it over here to be between location map and report profile. When I'm happy with what I've added, I'm going to click on save and close. Now before I do that, notice that this has addenda selected, and if I click down here, I can go to primary and recommended. I'm not going to go over that right now, but we do go over that in our tips and tricks. And essentially, what I show you in the tips and tricks webinar is how you can change a report type. So very easily you can convert a 1004, or actually you would maybe convert a 2055 to a 1004, or maybe use the 1004 to create a 1004D. There's a couple of different things you can do as far as changing report types, and you don't have to open up a blank report and import stuff into it. It's very simple. You just basically just replace the main report type and everything falls into place. But for right now, we're just adding the COVID addendum. I'm going to click on save and close, and now there it is. It just got added, and this is a multi-page addendum. So if I click on the little arrow right here, you can see I can jump to one of the 3 pages that are part of the Fannie Mae COVID-19 addendum. Same thing over here for uniform, the UAD. Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. I can't talk today. Same thing. I can go to jump to any selection that I want there, but I'm already currently viewing that form, so I can just scroll down here as well. So you might be going, well, wait a minute. How do I view, let's say, the sketch? Well, all you got to do is come over here and double click, and you'll notice that it gets opened up as a tab, just like it would in a web browser. So there we go. There's our tab there. And I can even pull these tabs out if I want. I can put the tabs back. We'll go over more about how to do that kind of stuff in the tips and tricks, but just know that you can simply double click on something to view it. And when you're done, you can click on the X up here, just like a tab in a web browser, and you can get rid of it. Now, I showed you how you can come up here and use the add, remove forms dialog to add stuff, but there's another way you can do it as well, which is a little bit faster. You may have noticed that there are some icons next to some of these forms and addenda over here. The padlock icon means that that particular form or addenda is required for the report to function correctly, so it can't be removed. The star is the primary report type, in this case a 1004, UAD 1004. And then you may have also seen these little green pluses, and they match the green plus up next to add. And if you were to take a guess as to what that does, you would probably be right. If I come over here to sales comps 4 through 6, 1 through 3, of course, are already in the main body of the report. I can open it up. There's comps 4 through 6. But what I can also do is I can click on the little plus here, and what it will do is it now adds sales comps 7 through 9, and it also adds sales comps photos 7 through 9 as well. And then if I want to get rid of them, I can just select them and click on remove. So it's a real easy way to add extras. If I want to add some extra general photo pages, I can. There we go. I can add some of those as well. So it's really easy to add additionals of those. And you can also rename these. So if you don't like it that it's called General Photos and you wanted to call it Garage Photos, you can highlight it, come up here to rename. There we go, Garage Photos 3x5. And now I don't even have to open up to know what that is. I just, at a glance, I know that those are the garage photos. Once again, if you guys have any questions, just use that live chat that's over to the right, or you can send an email to training@sfrep.com. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have as we go along. Moving on to the validator panel. The validator panel is just kind of like how it is in Appraise-It Classic. There are two types of validations. There is real-time validation and comprehensive validation. The easiest way to see real-time validation would be to come up here to the state field. If I type in NC and tab out of it, notice that nothing happens. But if I make a typo, or if I think I'm in Canada and I type in BC, well, that's a Canadian province. It is not a US state, so it turns it red. If I come back in here, as a matter of fact, you'll notice that if I was down here in the grid and I noticed that I had a hard stop listed over here, I could just double click and it will jump me back to that particular section. And I'll go, oh, bonehead, I said BC, it's right next to N. I had a fat finger, we'll just do NC. Tab out of it, and now I've fixed it, and now it goes away. The real-time validation you're gonna do at the end of the report. I'm not gonna do it now because everything would just go crazy and everything would turn red because I haven't filled out anything in this particular report. But if I want to do a comprehensive validation, all I need to do is click on the validate button, and you'll want to take note of what the rule set is. By default, it's going to be UCDP, but you can also pull that down and select FHA. The FHA rule set is very, very similar to UCDP, but it does have a couple of differences. So if you're doing an FHA report, you'll want to select FHA for your rule set. So always double check that rule set before you do your comprehensive validation, because it will remember what your last selection was. So if you did a FHA report previously, you'll want to make sure that you check that and put it back to UCDP if you're just doing a standard UAD report. Coming up here to the responses tab. This is one of my favorites because I love the way that the developers implemented responses, common responses in Appraise-It Pro. So this replaces the F key bar at the top and the control, I think it was control G for doing those global responses, and then the regular responses as well. I think it was F2 to bring up the regular responses in Classic. It's been a long time, so I've really messed with Classic. But we don't have an F key bar up here at the top anymore. But if I come in here to city, you'll notice that I do have F keys assigned here, and they work just like they do in Appraise-It Classic. If I want to put Charlotte in there, I can hit F4 on my keyboard, and it's going to put Charlotte in there. So it works the same, and if I want, I can just come over here and double click on Charlotte to add it as well. However, there is another cool way that you can use common responses that was not in Appraise-It Classic. So if I do, this is the house I grew up in. I don't live there anymore, so feel free to go look it up. But we'll do 10949 Painter Street Road. Here's where we need to put the city in. So if I want to do Charlotte, I can hit F4, but all I have to actually do is do CH, and it will autofill Charlotte for me, and then I can just tab out of there. And of course, just like in Classic, you can have multi-line, multi-paragraph, a whole page of text if you want to, for your common responses. So once you've got a report really set up with common responses, you can see that you could just, type out the first letter or two of a response and fill it in and just tab out of it. So you could really start burning through a report very quickly. Something we also have now in these fields is automatically shrinking text. So if I'm in the city field here, I can fit in 2 Charlottes. But if I want to do a third, it would run out of the cell. But with Appraise-It Classic, what it'll do is it will automatically shrink the text for you so that you can fit a little bit of extra data in there. Now I can only do 3 Charlottes. If I keep going, you'll see now it's going to run off the out of the cell. But it's able to give you some extra space in there to be able to fill some things out. And really, especially if you're looking at the PDF version or the printed version of this, if you didn't know that the city field had been shrunk down a little bit, you'd be hard-pressed to even notice it because it has the same font. But where this really becomes handy is if you're in a multi-line field. If you think about it, you've got a lot more text that you can shrink down. And because of that, you might be able to add an extra full sentence on there before you have to trigger over into extended comments. And we know extended comments are annoying for the reader anyway, so it's a great way to avoid having to do that. To manage the responses, it's very self-explanatory. If you click on Manage Responses, you might recognize this dialog because it's lifted straight from Appraise-It Classic. So you manage responses just like you did in Appraise-It Classic. So if I had, I don't know, let's put, let's do Jupiter. That's a town near here. So we're going to do Jupiter, North Carolina. That is not in my listing here. So if I want to add it, all I have to do is come up here to Manage Responses. There it is. I can give it a title if I want. That's optional because if it's a 1 or 2 word response, you don't really need to put a title. But if it's a multi-paragraph or a multi-page response, you will want to do that. But there's Jupiter. I can also assign it an F key if I want. But if I don't want to, I just click Save, Close. And now if I come down here at the bottom, there's Jupiter. And if I don't have anything in here, I can just come over here, double click Jupiter, or I can just simply type in JU, there it is, Jupiter, and tab out. Remember I said there were 4 panels, but there's a secret panel. That one is Help. You probably, if you've been doing this for a while, you won't be using the Help tab. But if you do have trainees or interns or anybody that you're working with, the help tab can be very helpful to them. In every single field, it will give them guidance on what they should be putting in that field. But for those of us who have been doing UAD for 12 years or whatever it is now, this is redundant. We already know all this stuff. And then finally, we have the Format tab panel. Format panel is really easy to explain because this is basically the UAD panel that you know in Appraise-It Classic. So it's just been brought over here and has its own panel. It works the same way. If I come in here to Site, I could put in some information. If I do Construction Quality, I can use the pull-down menu and select Q2. However, for a lot of these fields, we've been doing this for 12, 13 years. We know what the formatting is. And so what you can do is you can actually just type directly into the field as well. And then of course, if you don't follow formatting, it's going to turn it red. But if I come back over here and I do Q2, it's happy with that. It doesn't turn it red. When you are not in a field that has formatting, you'll notice that we have a color key here. And you may have noticed that some of these fields are different colors. This explains that. The green are formatted fields. So when I go into a formatted field, this changes and becomes the UAD helper. Let's see. That's the crux of what I wanted to show you guys, because once I've kind of shown you this, you can kind of get started and start playing around with Appraise-It Pro. I do encourage you to do that. Remember, you can install Appraise-It Pro alongside Appraise-It Classic, so you can kind of start learning and using it at your own pace. Explore these menus. These menus may look familiar to you because if you use Microsoft Office, you will feel very at home in Appraise-It Classic. They're very similar. We even use the same development environment to make this, so everything's going to be very familiar, and you'll feel very at home if you ever use Microsoft Office. By the way, PDF here, you can insert documents from OpenOffice or from Microsoft Word or Excel. You can also insert PDFs, and unlike in Appraise-It Classic, you can put as many PDFs into your report as you want, and they can have an unlimited number of pages. And that's definitely where having it be a 64-bit program is going to definitely work in your favor, because you will have that memory that you can go to and use. The only other thing I really want to show you is going to be over here in the support tab. Check for new updates, of course, is here. What's new? What I do want to point out is going to be this email and chat here. If you need to contact tech support, just come to support and click on email, or send an email directly to tech@sfrep.com. This send feedback, I do encourage you to use that, but only use it if you have a suggestion for the product or something like that. Because if a lot of people use this for tech support, you will eventually get to tech support, but it's going to be a much slower process because it has to go to a couple of different places before it gets there. So I would use this email, which is under tech support. That will go straight to tech support. You'll also find links to all of our social media here, including our YouTube. If you want to go to our YouTube, it's simply youtube.com/SFREP. We have all of our how-to videos and trainings and webinars are all posted there and archived there. And also I want to show you, if you go to our knowledge base or to our website, and I'm just going to click on the knowledge base here because that'll go to the knowledge base. But actually what I want to do is, and you can't see this is over on my other screen. I'm going to pull it over here so you can see it. This is our website, of course. And one thing I do want to point out to you guys is going to be under training. If you mouse over it, don't click on it, just mouse over it, come down here to training calendar. This will show you our training calendar. And I have scheduled all of our webinars out to the end of the year now. So we can actually go to the next month. So this is the last training we're doing this month. The next one's going to be on the 1st of November. That is next Tuesday. And that will be Appraise-It Pro tips and tricks. That's the second part to this webinar. So all of you who are in this webinar, I would encourage you to go ahead and be prepared to go to this webinar at 1 p.m. Eastern time on next Tuesday. You don't have to worry about anything. We will email you, as we always do, the morning of to kind of give you a reminder. And we'll also post it onto Facebook. So hopefully you're a part of the Appraiser Exchange on Facebook. If you're not, just do a search in Facebook for SFREP Appraiser Exchange. That's where you guys can get together and talk about what's going on in the industry. So I do encourage you to take a look at the training calendar. So November 1st, we've got Appraise-It Pro tips and tricks. On the 11th, we've got buying a new computer, where I will go over the different computers that are out there currently and kind of give you guidance on what we think works best for Appraise-It Pro, and I can answer any technical questions that you might have as well. Dealing with photos in Appraise-It Pro is coming up. We've also got this one, an introduction to Appraise-It Pro, also coming up, and then buying a new computer again. This one will be buying a new computer, the holiday sales edition, where I'm going to go to Amazon and Office Depot and Best Buy and look at the different holiday sales that are going on for Christmas, because there's going to be some sick deals going on that I'll let you know and kind of give you my guidance on what I think is the best deal. Okay, so that's coming up at the end of next month. That's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, get them in now. Otherwise, you can send an email if you're a little bit shy or if you're watching this later, training@sfrep.com. sfrep.com. Thanks for showing up, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and stay safe and stay well.